This is episode number, drumroll please, episode number 100. Okay, now that you're done cheering, this is episode number 100 featuring Mark Fehlman.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and thank you for being here announcing for me on episode 100. I never thought I'd hit 100 episodes, quite frankly. And to think, we're almost close to 500,000 listeners. Can you believe that? I mean, this is like this phenomenon, right? So the word plein air, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody even knew what the word meant. Still, most people don't know what the word means. PleinAir magazine is the number one selling art magazine in the art category at Barnes & Noble. That includes photography magazines. It beats them. And it's a word that nobody knows. Plein air. How cool is that? And you're part of this. Thank you so much. 100 episodes. So cool. Well, anyway, the podcast, I digress. The podcast is brought to you by the PleinAir convention in San Francisco, and we're going to go up in wine country, and paint. And if you've never painted in the Bay Area, it's really cool. First off, we're going to some really cool places. We're going to paint the Golden Gate Bridge in Crissy Field, which is like very spacious, can spread out, but be careful because it can be windy. And then we're going to go up to wine country. We've got a couple other places we're working on right now, not confirmed yet, but everything is beautiful, stunning, different, and safe. Plus, if you're making the trip out to the Bay Area to paint, you got to go paint the redwoods, and you got to go down and paint some Monterey, and there's just so much around there. There's just staying within San Francisco, the streets of San Francisco, and there's so much. So you're going to be in the hotel all day long. Well, not all day long. You're going to be in the hotel watching on 4 different stages, and then we're going to go out and paint together. And we're there with you. We've got field instructors there with you. We've got a big group of people. You're going to have a ball. This is a lot of fun. Really a lot of fun. Anyway, San Francisco is probably the most popular location that we've ever gone to. And so there aren't going to be seats left at the end of the day if you don't do this pretty soon. Serious. No hype. Just do it. PleinAirConvention.com. And by the way, we just announced a bunch of new people coming, like Kathleen Dunphy and Joe Paquette. We've got Mark D'Alessio, Mark Fehlman, who's on this podcast, Lori Kersey, Brian Blood, Richard McKinley, Susie Baker, Albert Handel, Camille Preswatic, Joe McGurl, and Joe Zabukvik from Australia, great watercolor artist, and Keiko Tanabe, one of the great watercolor artists. Man, we just got a lot of watercolor people coming to this thing now, too. We have a separate stage for watercolor. So much about a faculty of 80 people, and you got these field painters there to work with you in the field. And they're very approachable. You don't have to be a painter. A lot of people have come to the convention for the first time, painted their first painting there, bought their supplies there in the expo hall. Very cool. Anyway, come visit PleinAirConvention.com. And the interview is underwritten by the PleinAir Salon Art Competition. We're going to give away big cash, a $15,000 cash prize at the PleinAir Convention. Might as well be you, right? $27,000 in annual cash prizes. This is cash prizes. A lot of competitions make up a bunch of stuff, a bunch of value, but they're not really giving out cash prizes. This is cash. This is all cash, $27,000 in cash. Got about 20 different categories, so you really increase your odds when you enter different categories. Some of them are outdoor categories, some are plein air, some are studio from plein air, some are, still life and figure, and, there's a lot of stuff in there. So you can really find some stuff that's your thing. And you also don't have to do fresh paintings. Like you can put your best paintings of all time in there. And I enter competitions like this. I don't enter this one because, quite frankly, I can't. But competitions like this, you enter each time. You enter the same paintings each time if you don't win, because different judges like different things. And also, the judges are typically art gallery people, and art gallery people are going to see your work. And guess what happens when they see your work? Possibly good things. Anyway, check it out, PleinAirSalon.com. I had a moment there. And coming up after the interview, I'll be doing a marketing minute, answering some marketing questions. But first, let's get right to our interview with maybe the world's nicest man, Mark Fehlman. Mark Fehlman, welcome to the PleinAir podcast.
Thank you. It's a real honor. I appreciate it.
Honor? Come on! We're the ones who are honored. We should be bowing at your feet. It's really been fun watching your career, because you're like an overnight success. You spent the last 100 years learning how to paint, and all of a sudden you're everywhere.
Yeah, well, it is. It takes tremendous effort. I figure I'm about 40,000 hours by now.
Oh, so you're just getting started.
Just getting started. I'm just scratching the surface.
Mark, for the benefit of people who are listening who don't know who the heck you are, kind of explain what it is you do.
Well, starting out, I was an architect for over 30 years and loved architecture.
No. I want to know what you do now. Tell us
a little
bit about your painting. Then we'll get into your history.
Okay. So I consider myself a full-time artist. I transitioned from architecture, but I paint, as I say, as much as I can get away with. I love to paint as much as possible. How
would you articulate your style?
Well, my style is an impressionist. It's heavily dependent upon light and dark. It's loose, colorful, and I pick subjects that are quite interesting. You also might say it's very graphic.
When you say quite interesting, what kind of subjects do you focus on?
I paint architecture.
Well, of course.
I paint the ocean. I love, I've been preparing this week for the Laguna Invitational, so I've been up in Laguna painting studies of the ocean. And I also really like going up to Utah to paint those red rocks up there. It's just beautiful because it's strong and graphic.
Yeah, I want to interject something here, because I think this is an important point for everybody who's listening. At the time we're recording this, we just came off of a major golf tournament in Europe, and the U.S. got slaughtered. And the reason that the U.S. got slaughtered, I'm not here to talk about golf, actually, but they got slaughtered because none of the U.S. players had ever played the course that they were playing on. And all the Europeans play that course all the time. And so what you've just said, I think, is really critical. You're about to be in a major show, to be on display painting. People are going to be watching you, and then your paintings are going to be in the show. And what did you do? You went there and rehearsed in advance. I think that's remarkable.
Well, I spent the last month, I cleared my schedule so that I could really think about Laguna and go up there. I went through my slides. I did sketches. I've done small paintings and large paintings just to get ready, because this is the big time. Laguna is one of the finest invitationals, and this year is their 20th anniversary, so there's 50 artists coming, all top-notch.
Yes, and I'm sorry to miss it. I was invited, and I'm going to be in Europe at the time, and it's really very frustrating. I recorded a video for them, but I'm sorry I'm not going to be there with you. But folks, this is the mark of a pro. This is what a really true pro does. I remember, Mark, when Max Ginsberg came into Austin to our soundstage here to record one of the videos. I said, what have you been doing, the last couple of weeks? He says, I've been practicing. He said, I practiced every day, all day for 2 weeks because I wanted to be tuned up for the video. And that's exactly what you're doing for this Invitational in Laguna. I just think that is remarkable, and that's a great lesson for everybody.
Well, I feel that, I don't have my lifelong training like other artists do because I had another career. And I feel that I need to get every edge that I can.
Well, that's smart. So let's back up and talk about that career. You were an architect for 30 years. Tell us about that. How did that begin, and what was your passion related to that?
Well, I wanted to be an architect since I was a very young boy. And the main reason was that I loved watching architects do their thing. I had a mentor who was an architect, and I thought it was a great career because it blended a lot of things: art, community building, working with other people. I mean, it was just a great mix of lots of different aspects. And so I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. When I got out of school, I established an office and had a successful practice for over 30 years. And what I focused on mainly was design. And that design was design of communities, design of houses, just about everything, downtown housing. And what I finished up with was the last 10 years of my career, I did movie theaters. And I got to design everything, including the carpet and the signage and the neon. And they were big, bold statements that were places where people love to go and they look forward to going to see the movies. And they wanted an enhanced experience. So I was really blessed to be able to do that, and each theater had a different theme to it related to where it was in the country. And I had a very satisfying career in architecture. I probably would have done it for the rest of my life until I found painting.
And how did that
made
happen?
A conscious. There was a woman who had a great gallery 2 doors down from us. And I used to go in there at lunch and look at these paintings and just fell in love. I found out that she taught classes. And once I started taking classes, that was it. I was on my trajectory to leave architecture and become a full-time artist.
So let's give her some props. Who was it?
This is Leela Hardy, who had a great school. In fact, she just finished up and has retired about 6 months ago, but she's been my constant friend and mentor.
So tell me about the track from that point forward. You studied with her, and then what started happening?
Well, she represented a great artist named John Asaro. And John, I just was enchanted with his paintings. They had so much color and shape. They were strong graphically. And about that time, the first big Sorolla show was at the Museum of Art in San Diego. And I went and looked at that art, and I was just so enamored of that work, his shape, his colors, his looseness. And John painted a lot the same way. So I was headed off in that direction. I started taking workshops over at Scottsdale with people like Ray Roberts and Milt Kobayashi and Mark Daly, people like that. And I just was getting sucked in and painting as much as I possibly could. I finally went to my business partner and asked him if I could leave the firm to paint full time, and he said, "When?" I said, "As soon as possible." So within about 3 months, I had my studio set up, and I was painting full time.
Wow, that was a gutsy move.
It was, and my wife, luckily, Felt comfortable with it, and it was a big jump. And I tell my friends sometimes, if I would have known how hard this was, I might not have done it.
Yeah,
But
well,
it's
nothing
been
good in
fabulous.
life would ever happen to anybody if they knew how hard it was.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So you're a plein air painter, but you're really a studio painter too.
Yes,
Tell me about
right.
that.
So I have always believed that plein air is about gathering ideas, gathering info, doing studies, and my work is really based on plein air, but I rarely sell my plein air paintings. There's a lot of things that have to go on in a painting, like the paint setting up and doing lots of things to a painting that you can do in the studio that are tough doing it in a 2-hour setting. So I do a lot of work to develop ideas, see graphic patterns. When I'm out there, I'll move shapes around. I'll change the height of something just to make it an interesting study. And I use plein air as a basis to my work in the studio.
I want to focus on that for a minute because I think it's really an important distinction that I believe, and I know I'm going to offend somebody here, and my intention is not to do that, but I believe that we tend to look at plein air as the end instead of a means to an end. And I think that if you look at most of the greats, the people who do, they're out there, they're doing plein air paintings, most of those people are using those studies to translate into studio paintings where they can really finesse things to a higher level. And some of them don't ever even sell their plein air stuff. Sometimes they'll sell their studies at a workshop or something. But I think that we as a community of plein air painters need to understand that though it's great to be able to be a plein air painter and it's great to be able to go out and do these shows and to be able to sell at these shows, there is also another option for you, and that is that you can use these studies as a way to really navigate your color and your light and your shape and your experimentation into something bigger and more prominent.
And the way that I look at it is you can't just paint from a photograph. It's a little bit like the difference between a digital recording of a concert and going to the concert. You don't see or hear all the nuances of a live performance.
That's a great analogy, by the way.
Really think that being out there and seeing the subtleties of the colors in the shadows, for instance, and picking them up and maybe writing notes about them and doing things like that, you would never see that in a photograph.
Right. Now, do you ever use a photograph?
I definitely use photographs. In fact, I even Photoshop photographs to move things around, to increase the height of things. I do that as a reference, but I also reference my plein air paintings and my memory of the scene. I use every possible trick I can get. I mean, I do things like divide the canvas up into 9 segments, thirds each way. I do as much as I can to make sure that the composition is strong.
Now, I want to stop you there, too, because I think there's another distinction here. What I try to do is to point out things that maybe people who are relatively new to this or people who might not know this would notice. There's a belief by some people, again, I'm not trying to offend anybody, and there's not a right or wrong by any means, but there is this belief that when you go out, you paint exactly what you see. And exactly what you see may or may not present itself as a good painting. And you're talking about moving shapes around, changing the size of buildings, moving trees, moving other stuff so that it makes a great painting compositionally.
Right.
Now, what I'd be curious about is how did the architecture background both influence your career as a painter and hurt your career as a painter?
Wow. Well, I think that, first of all, just the creative process of developing an idea rather than going into it with a set idea is important to understand. I mean, to me, you have to be in the process to be creative. You just don't, ideas just don't pop into your head. I really like the process of creativity. And so that understanding of being insecure about what the outcome is important, and I really got that in the design process in architecture. I would say also just understanding color and beauty and the basic aesthetics of good design. I think I have a sense of that from architecture. As far as how it hurt it, I probably want to be too precise at times and get hung up in that. I see some of these great friends of mine who paint who, do a dash of paint and they're quite happy with it. And it's evocative and just says so much with one little stroke. I tend to not be quite as much like that. So I think I have to keep myself loose. I have to walk away from it and not overwork a painting.
Now, were there any principles in composition that come out of architecture that apply to painting?
Sure.
I think that I don't know what you studied or so on, but I assume you had to study things like classic Greek architecture, and classic Greek architecture was based on Feminati, and curious about that.
Right. We studied art and architecture together at the same time, and looked a lot at how what artists were doing were affecting what architects were doing, and vice versa.
Really?
And it would change a little more slowly than it changed in modern times, but I think the idea of there are several ideas in architecture. I mean, certainly the idea of balance and repetition is very strong in a lot of historic architecture. What I was drawn more to was off balance, and Edgar Payne talks a lot about that in composition, about a steel yard where you have weight on one side and lightness on the other side. So there are some competing ideas between architecture and art, but many of the concepts of composition that Edgar Payne talked about are prominent in architecture, and it's not a lot different when it gets down to it.
Cool. So 2/3 dark or 2/3 light, do you want to kind of explain that concept a little bit more?
Sure. First of all, I've said, and many others have said, that composition does all the work and color gets all the credit. Well, a part of composition is light-dark patterns. And when I first started painting, I was somewhat of a collector also. And I would go into a gallery, say in Santa Fe or Carmel, and I was most attracted to the paintings that had drama and punch and color to it, the ones that jumped off the wall. And what I noticed about those was that they tended to have pretty strong darks and pretty strong lights. So I try to pick scenes that have dark silhouettes, say in the foreground or the background, and then strong lights, because I feel it's dramatic, and it also plays into my idea of using strong graphic shapes. And I've just found, whether it's 2/3 light 1/3 dark, or vice versa, that it creates more interesting painting to use that concept.
Now, what about shape?
So I tend to be fairly shape-oriented, and maybe that's from architecture. I think that a good scene, almost any scene, needs to be designed. And what I try to do is see if I can pick out 4 or 5 strong shapes in a scene that I can play off. I can enhance. I can maybe design a little bit more. Whether it's the foam of the ocean or it's the shape of a mountain. I think in general we have this concept that if we could just paint the beauty of what we look at, that it would be a strong painting. But in fact, if you look at most good paintings, they're really designed, and it's somewhat similar to our regular everyday conversation. Isn't that interesting? But if you are shooting a movie and you can rehearse the lines, you have a writer to write the lines, you edit, you have the lighting right, you have all these sorts of things, you can make everyday conversation far more interesting, and you can create crescendos and lots of different elements that make it interesting. So I really think of myself somewhat as a screenwriter, where I'm editing and preparing and enhancing and trying to make shapes that delight the eye of the viewer.
So I want to probe that just a little bit deeper. You said something, but I can't remember what the heck it was. I remember now. Sure. The design of a painting, is that kind of coming out of you doing sketches before you actually apply paint? Are you applying paint out of the box? What's your process like?
I will sketch it. I will also take a photograph with my iPhone, and I've really found that if I take about 5 or 6 shots with my iPhone and then look at the shots and not look at the scene, look away from it, and see what graphically grabs me the most. Is it a high horizon or a low horizon? Do I put the big tree on the right or the left? Those sorts of things. I'll sometimes do a sketch. I'll look at it on the phone. I'll pick the one I like, and I'll go back and sketch it one more time. Then I'll sketch it. I usually try to do little painted sketches that are 8 by 10 or 9 by 12, and then I'll take them back into the studio and really, really think about it. I'll take lots of photographs. You can never have too many photographs, especially when they're digital. And I just work on that design throughout the whole process. And in fact, there's many times where when I'm painting, I'll say, I don't need that tree right there, or I ought to move that tree over. And I'll scrape it down and move the tree over to make it a stronger element. I'm always thinking about design and how I can say as much as possible with as little as possible.
So do you, to that point about moving the tree and scraping down, do you find that when you first started painting that you kind of fell in love with what you did and you were reluctant to do something like that?
Certainly more than now. I used to think when I was out painting, I had to paint something that I could give to my mother and she could put it over the fireplace. And now I really think of these as little notes that are not precious, but they're important to the process.
So you mentioned...
I've got stacks of paintings sitting around.
Yeah, firewood.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you studied under John Asaro. I think, if I remember you telling me, you also did some pretty serious study with Ray Roberts.
Yes. I actually have become good friends with Ray over the years, and I've organized workshops for him and I've probably done 30 workshops for him over the years. So sometimes I act in the workshop as his straight man, asking him the questions that all the students really want to ask. And that's been really beneficial to do. I will also say that, I look at other artists' work all the time. I look at their videos. I find that I pick up little tips from them, or a color idea, or a tube of paint or something like that that really helps me and takes me in a little slightly different direction.
Well, another thing. Go ahead.
I just really count on the interaction with all of my friends in the artist community.
The one thing that I've noted about the pros, not only do they practice, they never stop learning. They're always looking to discover that one thing that they don't know, and they're oftentimes, they'll look at somebody, let's say Ray Roberts, for instance, who's brilliant. They'll look at Ray and they'll say, hey, Ray does this particular thing really, really well. I happen to have a Ray Roberts painting sitting right beside me, which is one of the most exciting paintings I ever had access to. And, he's got the beautiful brush stroke and that thick paint, and he just does such a beautiful job with it. So I think they're always looking for that, who is the mentor, the workshop I can attend, the video I can watch, who's the mentor that has that one thing? Because, sometimes it's one tiny little piece that really revolutionizes your work.
I'll share that I just have gone through the video workshop that Deborah Hughes did and found it incredible. I know you interviewed her recently, but her Paint Like a Pro series broke things down for me that I've gone back and kind of reworked some of my fundamentals based on that, and it's really helped bring a freshness to my work that I'm always looking for. A few years ago at the PleinAir conference, Brian Mark Taylor talked about practice, and it really got me thinking about that, golfers, since you used the golf analogy, golfers play their game and then they go back to the practice range and practice their techniques. Maybe something wasn't working for them, or they go to the putting green and practice. And then they come back the next morning before they play their game and they practice. And so I'm always looking for kind of effortlessness in my technique, and that usually comes from practice.
The thing you have to be careful about, though, is that you can also get bad practice. And
true.
I think that one of the distinctions about pros is that pros are smart and they learn from their mistakes, but true pros learn from other people's mistakes. They get really good input, they get really good direction, and then they practice the really good stuff. Because, you can spend a lifetime practicing something that's bad and never know it, and that's why you've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone and get out there and study with people like you. I think you said you're doing, I'm aware anyway, that you're doing something in March at the Fredericksburg Artist School. Is that right? Doing a workshop?
Right. Yeah, I'm going to do a week in Fredericksburg, which I've never been to. I'm looking forward to it. I know it's down by where you are.
Yep, you're going to come here for drinks.
Yes. Well, I'm going to be there the 11th through the 15th of March, and we're going to paint outside for a few days and then paint inside. We're going to take our studies and develop them a bit more, because I feel like if you just paint plein air outside, you're not going to get the juice of talking about composition and light dark and be able to critique. So they've asked me to come down and teach, and I'm really excited about it.
They're terrific people. You're going to have a ball, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. I hope I'm in town. So for the people who might be listening to this who are trying to figure out what their path is going to be, you had to take 40,000 hours, as you mentioned, to kind of figure this all out. Is there anything that you would do differently, knowing what you know now, that might have sped up some of your process?
I hate to say it, but Brian Blood said to me once, it's painting mileage. And I think you have to make lots of mistakes and then really understand what the mistakes were to get better faster. I think that I took the right path in lots of different ways, and I'm still on the right path. I think you have to paint at least 4 or 5 times a week, to keep improving. You can't just do it 2 or 3 times a month. And I think that studying with really good people and maybe picking someone who you really want to paint like them, at least in the beginning, and take several workshops with them. Maybe, I bought a lot of paintings when I was first in the painting profession, and we have a fabulous collection of all painters that I like personally and like their style. And I think being around good art is really, really important. Being able to look closely, at what were those edges like, and what are the color relationships. I found that collecting is a part of my growth, and I would emphasize that.
When you're sitting around in your living room having a cocktail or something, and you're staring at a painting day in and day out and trying to figure it out, it really makes a huge difference. We were talking about this earlier this morning, is that there is a huge number of people who were collectors who have become artists. And, you're kind of in that thing. And, we have found that people are going to plein air shows and they get so enamored with it. They're buying paintings and they're into it, and they go, you know what? This looks like fun. I want to do this. And even though they're not necessarily all going to become professionals like yourself. So we're finding, we did a survey once, and 80% of the people who attend the plein air convention are art collectors. And 80%, that's huge. I mean, they're buying paintings and putting them in their homes and looking at them and studying them. Yeah. And I have paintings that I adore that are standing here in my office that I stare at, when I'm thinking or something. I'm not staring all the time, but it sinks in. I've got Ray Roberts here. Oh, yeah. I've got a Kevin McPherson. I've got a Laurie Putnam. I've got a Russian painting. And so I think that's really a very important point for people, is to, surround yourself by it. Now, you don't always, some of us don't always have the money to be able to do it. And even, I prefer originals, of course, but even if you can't get originals, surround yourself by the prints of brilliant artists, don't you think? And
get magazines too, and look online. I look at Pinterest all the time.
Yeah.
And just to see what people are doing. I try to be as engaged in the artist community as possible. Facebook and Instagram really allow you to do that. My mind is blown on a regular basis just by looking at what all my friends are doing, and it just gives you different points of view, and also connects you with them, so you can comment on their work. But I think fully immersing yourself in art, and I'll do the plug for the convention. I've gone since the beginning, and I just find the artist community is such a wonderful place to be, and the convention's like summer camp. I just get to see it all, the products, and hear everybody speak and develop relationships with people. That is so important.
Thank you for that. Yeah. You can't. I'll send you a couple bucks for that later. You can't articulate the value of sitting around the table with a bunch of artists having a conversation about paintings till the wee hours of the morning. you cannot articulate that value, and yet it has such tremendous value, and that sense of becoming part of the community. I mean, you and I met because of the convention. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And look, here I am on your show.
Yes, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I must say that I come back from painting invitationals and the convention and other places totally drained, because I've used every moment that I can possibly have to be with other people and talk to them and understand what they're doing. And it's a great experience.
Well, Mark, I want to acknowledge you and tell you that, first off, you're one of the truly nice guys in the plein air world, and that's saying something, because the plein air world is surrounded by really, really nice people, with a couple of exceptions. But
yes, I agree. We won't talk about them, though.
No, of course not. And but the idea is that, my wife always tells me, and I'm not trying to make this about me, but my wife said, we spent the first half of our marriage in and around the radio industry, and she started going to plein air events with me, and she said, these people have no egos. They're so nice. They're so friendly. They're so giving. They're competing with each other, and yet they're helping each other. She said it's the exact opposite of the people that we dealt with in the first part of our lives. It was like all about ego and all about them. And so I find this to be very satisfying. And yet you are like, in terms of, if there was a number, you're like number one nicest guy in the entire plein air community.
Well, thank you. And I will say that I felt the same way about architecture. There are a few egos in architecture.
You think?
And people are competing for jobs and that sort of thing. That's not true in the painting world.
Why do you think that is?
I think we're all out there in nature a lot. We're always struggling. We're always trying to figure out, how to paint well at the same time, how to make a living. And it's a constant struggle that keeps your ego very much in check. And I just think that there's a communion that happens when you're, with people in nature and you're having beers afterwards, and you admire so much other people's work. I also think that it's not cool to be a jerk in this art world. I'm just constantly amazed by the people like Kevin McPherson and Jove Wang and people like that, who I think are gods in our world, and they are just the nicest people.
Sweet people.
So it's not acceptable.
Very, very giving, and I think it's also, we're doing what we love. We're not tied to a desk. We're outside and just being what we love being. And I think there's something about that makes most people happy. Again,
yep.
Not everybody, but we're working on it. We're going to get them all happy.
Yeah. Not too happy, because if you're happy, you're going to be satisfied with your work.
I didn't say not challenged. But enjoying, I to me, the challenge is what gets me up in the morning. I love a challenge, and I love to be, I was going to say I love to be stimulated. I won't go there. I love to be mentally and emotionally stimulated. Mark, this has been a pleasure, and I'm just so thrilled to watch what's happening with your career. Because I kind of met you maybe in probably in Las Vegas or Monterey at one of the first conventions, and just to watch how you've become embraced, how your career has really taken off, how your paintings are just rock star. You're just really moving it forward, and gosh, I'm really honored to know you, and I'm really pleased to see what's happening in your life and your career.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll just throw it right back at you.
Come on.
Amazed. Watching the plein air movement and the plein air magazine and where that's taken you is pretty amazing.
It's not about me. Thank you. It's not about me. It's about us, and it's about we. And, the thing that's really critical for all of us who are pieces of the puzzle of this is that we've got to keep keeping the quality high. We've got to keep insisting that the shows are focusing on quality, that we're really vetting people so that we don't send a signal that plein air painting is just fast and not good. We've got to say, this is like, it took me 2 hours and 40 years to do this painting, or 2 hours and 10 years to do this painting. And so we just got to keep the mantra of quality alive. Quality, education, keep growing, quality, just keep that circle going.
I fully agree.
Well, thank you for being on the PleinAir podcast, and this was awesome.
Thank you. See you in Austin, if not San Francisco.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art. Proven techniques to turn your passion into profit.
Well, thanks again to Mark Fehlman. What a great guy. What a great guy. You got to get to know him. When you come to the convention, he's a very generous guy. Just go up to him and ask for his autograph, embarrass him or something. Well, in the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, which you can email me. My email is Eric, E-R-I-C, @pleinairmagazine.com. Here's a question from Barbara H. of Suffolk, Virginia. My art is selling, and I'm becoming better known in the art world. When is it time for me to quit my day job and go into art full time? Oh, well, I did a product. I don't mean to hype you on a product here, but I did a product, How to Quit Your Job and Become a Successful Full-Time Artist. And I go into about 3 hours of depth in how to do that and what the timing should be. And basically, the idea is you want to have this overlap. You want to get to the point where you're consistently replacing close to your, or maybe all of your other income as a part-time artist, or at least having the confidence that you're about to get there. Because starting out, you're going to have to spend some money on marketing, and it's better to spend that money on marketing when you've got a job and you've got some extra income. You got to have to build yourself up. You got to make sure that you're working all the different angles. By the way, I'm going to talk at the PleinAir convention about a guy I met recently, had lunch with just a few weeks ago, who is making $5 million as an artist. And it's a great story. And he does everything the opposite of everything everybody else does. And I'm going to tell that story on stage in Art Marketing Bootcamp because it's so interesting, and I learned so much from him and how he built his business to $5 million. This is a guy, an artist, and $5 million. I mean, he's rolling in it. This guy is rich. So anyway, not that it's all about being rich, but it never hurts, right? So, if your work's being represented by a gallery or you lost a gallery, maybe you can get the gallery person to give you a recommendation or a letter or something if you have to switch galleries. The other thing is you never want to have all your eggs in one basket, because if you're in one gallery and they go away, guess what happens to you? Now you're scrambling, and now you're going to have weeks, months without any sales until you get somebody, until you get them up to speed, until they can market you and get their people familiar with you. So I like to have 3. I think 3 is a nice, manageable number. You can have more than that, but not too much more. Some people do 4 or 5, but it depends on how much work you can produce and how much quality work you can produce. So you want to have a couple so you have some security. And, if you want to get into galleries, then, the best way to do it is to get invited in. That means they need to invite you. That's not you calling them, because, there's this sense of begging. And by the way, galleries get dozens, sometimes hundreds of calls and emails and packages, and they just kind of get sick of it. So you want them to reach out to you. And I have a lot of strategies in my book and some other places in my videos where I talk about how to get them to reach out to you. So one of the ways to get them to reach out to you is to get referred in. So find other artists who are in the gallery and talk to them and get to know them. And then maybe at some point, once you're comfortable with that, ask them if they'd make a recommendation. And they oftentimes will. Next question is from Sandy in Colorado. Hi, Sandy. All right. So one day we got to figure out how to get these people to actually call in and do it like a talk show. And then I'll be able to interact with them. That'd be more fun. Anyway, Sandy says, I've been in a series of local galleries that have closed. What is the best way to approach major established galleries? I think I just answered that question in the above But, you got to get references. You got to get invited in. You got to ask the owner of the gallery to contact people who purchased your artwork. If a gallery goes out of business, at least you could do is see if they'll possibly give you the list of people who bought your artwork so you can contact them direct or give them to another gallery. And I like to have the galleries give me the names. I have an agreement with them as I'll never approach them or I'll never violate the agreement with the gallery, but I like to send them a thank you card. And so they'll send me the note and say, I'll write a note to them and send it on. And then I have the address, and I'm not going to ever do anything with it until the gallery goes out of business. And I don't anticipate my gallery going out of business, knock wood. But anyway, I think that it's a good practice. And you also want to put your website and stuff on the back of the panel and burn it in there with a wood burner so it doesn't get covered up. And that way people can kind of go to your thing, get your newsletter, get on your list and stuff like that. So I hope that helps. And anyway, I wish you luck. Sandy in Colorado. Sandy, I wish you great luck. Podcast is brought to you by the PleinAir Convention in San Francisco and Wine Country in April. Space is going to fill up very rapidly. You got to do this. This is going to be the best one of all time. I'm telling you, painting the Golden Gate Bridge is like a lifetime dream come true. It is. I've done it. It is spectacular. Spectacular. And so are the artists that are coming to this thing this year. I mean, it's just spectacular. Check them out. There's so many to mention, and I can't give them all airtime here, but I wish I could. Anyway, check them out at pleinairconvention.com, and there's more coming. The interview is underwritten by the PleinAir Salon bi-monthly art competition, $27K in cash prizes, including a $15,000 grand prize, and it might as well be you. And surprisingly, a lot of people came out of nowhere, never before discovered, and it ended up winning the main prize. Shelby Keefe. Nobody ever heard of Shelby Keefe. And then all of a sudden she wins this prize, and now she's famous. Anyway, bi-monthly winners win features in the PleinAir Today newsletter. The main winner gets on the cover of PleinAir magazine, which is pretty cool. And you can learn more at pleinairsalon.com. If you haven't seen my blog called Sunday Coffee, I do it on Sunday mornings. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com, where you can also subscribe. Anyway, this was so cool. Yeah! So cool. 100 episodes. And who knew? PleinAir, little old PleinAir that nobody ever heard of. PleinAir is so cool that collectors are listening, artists are listening, people who don't know what the heck it is are listening. People are learning PleinAir painting, showing up at the convention. They've never painted before in their life. And it's all happening because of you. So thank you so much for spreading the word. Tell everybody about it. Let's see if we can get it up to 1 million listeners. Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know what I'd do with that. Hey, I think that a great idea. If everybody would just send $1, I'd be rich. Well, don't do that, please. I don't want to get in trouble. Anyway, this is always fun. Let's do it again sometime like next week. I will see you then for episode number 101. By the way, 101 is a highway that goes right through San Francisco. Anyway, I'm Eric Rhodes, the publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. I'm having too much fun. I think it's time for me to sign off. Remember, it's a big, beautiful world out there. Go paint it. I'll see you. 100 episodes. How cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes. You can learn more at artmarketing.com. This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.